recommended. So.
All right, welcome back. Here we are boiling into the afternoon, and we want to welcome up Shane Johnson, President of the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police. Hey, he came back. Good to see you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
And we're going to do a little bit, he's going to share a little bit about the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs, and then I think roll right into the marijuana studies we had emailed to us. Please, sir.
Thank you, Chairman, Committee. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk a little bit about marijuana. In the beginning, I'll just say I realize that there's a wide range of attitudes and beliefs and theories about marijuana and use. This conversation could last literally a week, and there'd still be information to share. It could go in so many different directions because there's talk about medical marijuana, then there's recreational marijuana, and the legalization of one or the other or both, and how those things work. So in an effort to try and hit a couple key points, I would just say that the possibilities are endless about what direction this may go. So I will try and keep on task as far as what I'd like to share, and then as we go along, there's also a couple other people here with us that, if given the opportunity, would like them to share a little bit of information and some, including a story. So if I'm not hitting specifics that you'd like, please let me know and I'll try and do that. A little background, I come to you as the sheriff in Lincoln County, Wyoming, of about 8.5 years. And the president of the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police. Recently, the association has taken on an education effort for marijuana, and we have partnered with the Daniels Fund, who's given us a grant to be able to maximize the efforts in teaching the public about marijuana and some of the things that come along with the use of marijuana. So we're excited about that. We feel like it's important. I can tell you from a personal standpoint, I'm very much in favor of the people having a say in what goes on. I realize that that's all part of this. I came from a law enforcement career in Utah and Las Vegas before I moved here. I spent my summers here on my grandfather's farm here in Wyoming, and always wanted to end up back here, and I feel very fortunate. And one of the reasons I do is because Wyoming is a great place to live because of common sense government and, in many cases, a small government. So I know all those things are related to the discussion of marijuana, and I'll try and, again, keep on task as far as what some of the things that are going on in our state right now and some of the concerns from a law enforcement standpoint that we have. I want to talk a little bit first about the HIDA report, and I know this was split up on the agenda, but there's two different sections. But the HIDA report is a report that's been put together, and it talks a little bit about, I gotta get my paperwork, here we go, about the effects and some of the things that we've seen happen in Colorado since the legalization. Of course, when we talk about legalization, there's two different parts of that. There's a medical element, and then there's a recreational element. And so some of those things are, it's necessary to keep mindful of the differences. But what we have seen, and I know that there are some people that would dispute this, but I think that it's important that we look into it at a level and keep open-minded about where this information comes from. That across the board, we've seen increases in areas that we don't want to see increases since the legalization of marijuana. So Impaired driving related to marijuana has been increased and since the legalization. The youth use has also increased, and I know again that there are those that say that that's not the case. There's a clear indication that there's an increase by the youth in the community since legalization. I know one study that says since marijuana was legalized for medicinal use, there hasn't been a raise. Well, that report is, I think, dated a little bit, and also many of the things that are going on in the different states are very early. So some things are yet to be seen, but we do have some early indications. As you would expect, marijuana use in general has risen since the legalization. The visits to emergency rooms and hospitals related to marijuana have increased since the legalization, and exposure to marijuana by children is also increased since legalization. In large part, something that we'll talk about here in just a few minutes, because of the edibles and the push by the industry to take away the picture of that the way to the only way to use marijuana is to smoke it. We have since you can purchase it in so many different formats at this point, but I say brownies, but as I say that, many of you know that's been around for years and years and years. I don't know how you know it, but you probably know there's been brownies being used for years. But they're also in gummy bears. Now they have Pop-Tarts. Instead of Pop-Tarts, it's called Pop-Tarts, and they infuse it into drinks. And so there's so many different ways to ingest marijuana, and part of the issue that comes up with that is that the access to children. Certainly a gummy bear, gummy worm, something like that is appealing to a child. That's who eats those type of things normally, and when they're infused with marijuana, the kids don't know the difference. If those things aren't taken care of, the incidence of use by children or accidental ingestion certainly increases. The other thing that has happened that's a direct effect to the state of Wyoming is major increases in the amount of marijuana that's bought legally in Colorado that's making its way across the border into a state that, as of right now, it's obviously still illegal. So it's become a resource for those in Wyoming that want to use marijuana to go down there and get it and bring it back into our state, whether they're bringing it back for personal use or selling it. Again, it's still illegal in Wyoming, and there's still concerns that way about it making its way here. I do want to say on the outset, I am not a crusader against marijuana. I am a crusader for public safety, and these two things are related. I am very much in favor, personally, of the continued study of marijuana for medicinal purposes, and what possibly is out there that that marijuana can be used for to help people that are suffering from conditions can be treated with marijuana. I think that's only the right thing to do, and like any other type of medication, it should go through that process and be tested and have studies done for its use. What I have a real concern about is us calling marijuana a medicine and treating it unlike any other medicine that's out there. In other words, it's not prescribed by a doctor in a way that you take this much at this time of day for this many days, and if your symptoms go away, then you stop. We give you a card, and for the next year, you get to buy marijuana at a reduced rate. Not medical marijuana per se, it's only medical in the sense that you pay a different tax rate. But in a very real sense, it's the exact same stuff the guy next to you in Colorado is buying for recreational use. And so that to me is not medicine, and that's where a lot of these concerns come up. I don't think that there's any favors done by the industry to call it medicine on one hand and then turn around and sell it as Gorilla Glue, Bruce Banner, Green Crack, Purple Haze, Chem Sour Diesel, Durban Poison, Peanut Butter Crunch, Purple Dream, Purple Punch, Shark Bite, White Ape. It doesn't sound like medicine to me, and I have, again, a real concern. I'm very much aware of the hands-off approach of Wyoming government. I'm very much in favor of that, but we also have a public safety element that is certainly a vital role of government that we need to weigh out when these things move forward. So I would like to ask the chairman's permission to invite some local prevention educators up to share a little bit if they'd like to, and as a resource also for the committee, and any questions about the HIDA report. But as we move forward with time in mind, there's a couple things that I want to make sure that we cover before we're done, is the danger of the edibles and where that's gone, and also this marijuana is not the same marijuana that was being used 30 years ago. This marijuana is different. It's much more potent. It's been chemically engineered to be that way. It's not, if we don't recognize the difference between the marijuana 30 years ago and the marijuana today, then we're doing a disservice to not make decisions based on that knowledge. So,
Sure. Who do you got?
I want to invite Charlotte Carlton and Rachel Rodriguez-Williams. They're from the Cody area with community prevention. They're community prevention professionals with PMO locally here. Thank you. I think Charlotte has provided a folder for each one of you, if I'm not mistaken, about some of the education materials that are currently being distributed and some of the concerns that we have on the prevention side and also on the law enforcement side of specifically edibles, but also how marijuana has changed. Charlotte, you have any comments that you'd like to share with the chairman's permission?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, my name is Charlotte Carlton, as I've just been introduced. I work for the Prevention Management Organization of Wyoming, but before that I worked for the Pacific Institute for Research and Evaluation, and there I directed a rather large substance abuse prevention project for upwards of 20 years that covered 12 states in the Southeast region. And what that experience taught me was that data matters, and the source of the data matters. Hearing someone speak with emphasis does not necessarily make it true. And the HIDA report that was just mentioned is one of the most useful resources that I've seen in my long career in substance abuse prevention. They have tracked a variety of data sources and data sets across the years, from the pre-medical period through the commercialization period up through recreational period, and have determined a number of trends that I think we here in Wyoming can benefit from knowing. It's important, I think, to make our decisions based on data and not necessarily passion. And I retired from substance abuse prevention and moved to Wyoming because Wyoming is Wyoming, and was here about 10 seconds before I thought I had to get back into this work. It matters. So some of the materials that I've produced for you, or our committee and our coalition here in Park County has produced for you, the first one is this little book that you have. And if you would look over on page 15, when we say it's not the brownie generation anymore, we mean it. It's not what we did and what we saw in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. They're Pop-Tarts, they're Hashies instead of Reese's, it's Baby Jane's instead of Baby Ruth. It is deliberately marketed to a youth audience. And on the next page, page 16, the oils that can be extracted through a rather extensive butane process. And you'll see this center picture. It makes a little paste that can be smoked and vaporized and whatnot. The interesting thing about this little paste is when it's liquefied, it can be injected into just about anything. And the potency is exceedingly high. In the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, we were talking about a 2% THC content, anywhere from 2 to 5%. These concentrates can be upwards of 90%. And they can be put in an asthma inhaler looking item, which makes it awfully difficult for law enforcement to determine if that's a real asthma inhaler or if it's something with an illicit substance in it. It can be put in e-cigarette vaping devices. I just learned not too long ago, I had an email come across my desk that you can now get THC infused Keurig cups to go in your morning coffee. So it's everywhere. And the possibilities are seemingly endless with how we can ingest these chemicals. So my point in all of that is to say that this is an emerging field. It's changing not on a daily basis, but on an hourly basis, it seems. The technology is rapidly advancing, and we need to be aware of that. And let's see.
I just add one
Yes.
thing about the edibles. One of the things that's caused big problems when it comes to edibles is the lack of consistency throughout the product. So if you have a cookie and it's infused with marijuana, we don't know to what level. We don't know if it's distributed evenly through the cookie, if whoever was putting the oil on there got a little more on this side, and so there's not any real clear understanding of what you're eating and how much of the THC you're going to get. The other thing about that is that it's not an immediate effect. So if you eat what they may recommend as a dosage, 1/8 of the cookie, and you don't feel something right away, the tendency is to eat more of that. Well, pretty soon you've taken 8 doses of it, and it all hits you at a later time. And one of because there's up to a 45-minute delay of when you're actually feeling the effects of that. If you continue to ingest it, then over time you're going to have so much more in your system than what you intended to have. The other part of that is from a law enforcement standpoint, that as those effects last longer and you get into a vehicle and drive, obviously that can be a law enforcement and a public safety issue. So I wanted to add that in there.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, to follow up on that very point, almost 1 in 5, just shy of 20% of all the fatalities in Colorado have a driver who tested positive for marijuana. 1 in 5. So it's an important concern, exactly. And I wanted to get back to also, and then I'm going to stop. I wanted to get back to the issue of the potency in the edibles versus potency in the traditional leaf marijuana. A single ounce, this is from the Hyder report, a single ounce of marijuana, depending on the solvent type and production method, can produce between 347 and 413 edibles of 10 milligram strength. So when we're talking about ounces of leaves versus ounces of oils, it's a significantly different process and a significantly different result. Thank you.
Chairman, what I'd like to do with your permission is invite Sergeant McCaslin from Cal PD to share a specific incident about that's directly related to edible, and then we'll continue on from there.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
some of you have probably heard, and I know that it was in the news about a student from Wyoming that went to Colorado and was involved in an incident and ultimately lost his life. Sergeant McCaslin has some more basic personal knowledge of that, and I'd like him to share that with the committee today.
Go ahead.
Sergeant Matt McCaslin, Powell Police Department. Thanks for your time today. I think this particular case, this particular story really illustrates the potential dangers associated with marijuana edibles. As Mr. Johnson has said, this hits home for us because it happened with one of our community members. A young man going to school in Powell at the Northwest College had gone down to Denver, Colorado for spring break. During that time, he and his friends went and purchased some edible cookies. Went back to the hotel. They each had their own. These cookies they were set up as having about 6.5 servings per cookie. I don't know that I've ever eaten a sixth of a cookie myself, but in this case, they were advised just to eat a portion of the cookie, a sixth. After they ate that, he had eaten just his portion, felt no effects of it, so after about half an hour or so, he ended up eating the rest of the cookie. This is one of the issues with the edibles, in that it takes quite a long time before you start to feel those effects. In this particular case, he ended up a couple hours later started to act erratically, talking incoherently, talking to a lamp, getting a little physically violent, throwing things off the shelves, tearing things up in the room. Eventually, this young man ran out the room and jumped over the balcony off a 4-story building in that hotel and fell to his death. One of the interesting things about this particular case, this was the first time that, according to the coroner, they listed marijuana intoxication as a significant contributing factor to his death. Through the autopsy, there were no other substances on board. There was no alcohol, no other controlled substance. It was strictly the THC that was in his system. The levels that he had in his system, according to the coroner, were 7.2 nanograms per milliliter of blood. In Colorado, they say that 5 nanograms per milliliter is legally intoxicated in that state. As I said, this really hits home, not only for us in Powell, but for Wyoming in general, because we're seeing these things a little more and more. And as has been stated before, the marijuana that we're seeing today is not the marijuana of the 70s. Those THC levels are quite high. Often for a regular marijuana plant, you're often looking anywhere from 17 to 30%, where it was in the single digits back in the 70s. And then when you start to get into these concentrates, the oils, they can be upwards of 98% THC.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman, I just want to briefly conclude some comments. Like I said, this could go on we could go through the Hyde report, we could dispute back and forth about some things that people don't agree with in there, or we can talk about several different medical organizations that have come out against marijuana as a medicine for a variety of reasons, and then the next thing that will happen is there'll be a doctor that is for it. So I mean, those kind of discussions can go on and on and on. But there's there are some societal consequences to marijuana, and if we ignore that, then we're not doing ourselves any favors by not having all of the information. I don't believe in scare tactics. I don't believe that coming up here and telling you that Wyoming, as we know, it's going to come an end if this isn't stopped in its tracks. But what I will say is if we fail to recognize what some of the issues that come along with the legalization of marijuana are, then we're setting ourselves up for some real societal issues. And there's, the best science project in the world going on just south of our border that we can look to for what the consequences of those have been. And they're always going to tout, well, look how much tax money that we've made. But the governor, just in a very, very recent interview on CNN, said, I tell other governors, we haven't made any money on this. All the money that's come in has gone to education for youth, which everybody can agree that should not be using marijuana, and going into the regulation that comes along with legalization of marijuana, both medically and recreational, all the government and infrastructure that has to go into place to monitor that. So it's not a net gain as far as money, and I question the idea, the theory behind, legalize it and let's have all those tax revenues come in. I don't think that's again, a personal opinion. That's not the way. If we're looking to legalize it so we can have more money, then I think we've missed the mark. Again, there's many other discussions that can stem off from this, but I'll submit that, and I appreciate the opportunity, Chairman, Committee, to talk a little bit about this.
Sure. You referred to the Hyder report quite a bit. We got an email, I believe, with the whole document. And in our packets, we have the summary. Just, and I think you have to look through the whole document to find it, but this Hyder report, where was the information gathered? Is it one person's opinion, or tell me a little bit about that?
Well, it's not based on opinion. It's based on facts gathered from the Hyder group.
Who's the Hyder group?
It's it was mentioned earlier about that they support high intensity drug trafficking enforcement. So it's a group that certainly is on the side of targeting drug dealers and working along those lines. And so these are information gathered from statistics in Colorado. It's not an opinion piece. It's based on facts. It's based on real incidents, and certainly and admittedly, there are going to. I mean, we're talking again about a very new law by all standards in Colorado about the legalization of recreational marijuana. So we don't have 10 years of the legalization part of it to go on. So these things are changing. The other thing that I think is very important from a law enforcement standpoint, when you're enforcing DUI and you have somebody that's been consuming alcohol, you have the ability at the side of the road, you have portable breath testers, you have tools at your disposal to be able to tell where that person's at as far as a level. Those things aren't possible currently with marijuana, so you don't have the ability right away to know intoxication level. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about this person may be under the influence of marijuana right now, but those metabolites and those things stay in the system for 3 days, but he's not under even though some of that stuff may be in your system 3 days later, he's not, still being affected by that. He should be able to drive. So it brings up a whole new set of issues. But I apologize, but to get back to your question, it's based off statistics through police departments and governmental agencies. Talks about hospital visits and emergency room visits. So all those are based off statistics gathered from those agencies, and we'll continue to learn more as time goes on. Again, we don't have 10 years of experience. to go off, which is another caution of, let's wait and see what there's no rush to, our kids and our societies are the losers in this if we rush into something.
Thank you. Questions? Representative Belton.
Thank you. I'm somewhat loath to accept as gospel a study that's based on an organization in its original premises is opposition to what's occurring in Colorado. I'm just curious if you're aware of any peer-reviewed academic studies of what's been going on in Colorado, or are they taking a slower, more cautious approach?
Well, again, we could spend 3 weeks here going through studies on every side of that.
I'm asking
So
for a peer-reviewed academic study that's a pretty standard measure of bias and accuracy. That's all I'm asking. I'm not necessarily hoping to debate the content of this study or the content of another study, but there are certain academic standards that apply when you're doing studies, and I'm just wondering if this has been peer-reviewed, or if there are peer-reviewed studies that you're aware of that we could, as a committee, review as well.
I don't have that information right now as far as a peer review. If again, this information is pulled from statistics, so.
I'm a politician and a lawyer. We can selectively pull statistics to support our respective positions. That's why they have a peer review process. And I'm just wondering if we have peer reviewed studies. Apparently we don't.
Not that I'm aware of.
Any other questions for the sheriff? Thanks for coming up and joining us on this. Are you going to be able to stick around
I will.
a little bit? Okay.
Thank you.
Excuse me for a second, Sharon. Is there any other questions or discussion from the committee of the sheriff about anything from search warrants to shoplifting? Putting on the spot down here. Okay, thank you. All right. Let's get over to our last bill of the day, and that would be controlled substances.
I think there are some members of the public here that would like to comment on the study.
Yep, excuse me, let's do that. Let's open up public comment about, the topic, impacts of marijuana. Please come up and address the chair, state your name, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, also, if I may, while she's approaching, I've got a pile of handouts. I don't know who any of these things came from. If somebody who's speaking provided me of these, if they could signpost that, because
Okay.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Carrie Satterwhite, and I'm here as just a public person, although I do have to tell you that I am a volunteer for NORML at the present time. I'm here to talk to you about the Rocky Mountain Intensity Drug Trafficking Areas booklet that they have put out. I read the information in the booklet, and I noticed that some things did not make sense to me. And then at the end of some of the beautiful charts that they have in there would be boxed windows with notes in them. And as I read through the notes, it was clear to me that all of the information in the booklet was based on opinion or information that wasn't complete. Flawed data and what they call marijuana mentions or marijuana related. That means that marijuana was present, but it doesn't mean that marijuana intoxication was evident or that marijuana was even a contributing factor. It's disturbing to me that they would do anything to make everyone think that ending marijuana prohibition is a really bad idea. For instance, in their book, under impaired driving, they showed us the total number of accidents being very high as related to marijuana. If you took the entire chart, you will see that over a 9-year period, the total number of accidents were down by almost 10,000 deaths. On page 24, there's a nice graph about the DUIDs, but then you see a note that says that this information is based on opinion only. No testing for marijuana was done. No proof that marijuana was a contributing factor. On page 30, they say researchers found that marijuana users are 25 times more likely to be involved in an accident. But the actual study's conclusion was that after taking all factors into account, that the percentage fell to around 1.05, and that was no longer a significant factor. As for the testing of marijuana results, I don't think that 1 nanogram or 5 is a clear indication of impairment due to how marijuana is stored in the fat cells of the body. And it can stay in a person's system for a very long period of time, sometimes up to 30, 40 days. The DOT right now uses a 50 nanogram system for failure of a drug test. Now this isn't for impaired driving. And if you fail that test, then they go down to a 15 nanogram as a follow-up on any failures. So
Mr.
the
Chairman, can I ask the witness a question?
Sure. Representative Baker.
We have your testimony here. Do you have anything outside of this that you'd like to tell us?
Well, I guess I would like to say that they have talked a lot about edibles, and those edibles also include CBD oils, which they are using for people with seizures, multiple sclerosis, any kind of a neuro situation. While I see that there is a problem in Colorado with the amount of THC that they are putting in the edibles, I think Colorado recognizes that this is a problem also. But you can't discount edibles totally. People who have cancer or the like maybe have throat cancer. They can't always smoke or vaporize or however else they might choose. An edible might be their only, with the drops, might be their only way. As far as toxicity and the doctor can't really regulate it, I think that they do regulate it. The medicine itself is self-regulating in that you kind of just know that you've met what you need for as far as the medicine, what you need to fix what the problem is. Like if you take it for chronic pain, you know when your pain is gone. Now, THC affects the brain marijuana affects the brain, but not the brain stem, where opiates and the medications that are being prescribed to people now affect the brain stem and the brain. So you can overdose from the medications that are being prescribed now, where with the marijuana you cannot overdose yourself because it doesn't tell your body to shut down. Although I am really sorry about the 19-year-old that was killed in Powell, he was not old enough to purchase the cookies that he got, and we're talking about one death, which one death is too many, but no one thinks twice about the kids who are dying from prescription medications and meth, alcohol, and all the other things. We're so focused, and a lot of people say, why should we add one more thing? And I can tell you that from the reason I'm into this fight is because I have a failed back surgery. So I have to take a lot of pain medication to control what I have for pain. And why should we add that one more thing? And it's because that thing is safer than all the medication that they can throw at me. And if you're talking about public safety, I would rather have to worry about medical marijuana as for people for medication than to worry about the pills that they're throwing at us now. So that's what I have to say about it.
Any questions of this witness? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Public comment. Come on up, sir.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I'm Chief Roy Ecker of the Powell Police Department. I'm going to try and not regurgitate everything that you've already
Can you
heard.
give us your name a little slower there?
Yeah. Chief Roy Ecker, Powell Police Department.
Thank
I'm going to try and not regurgitate everything else. I just want to add a few more things. I had an opportunity last winter to travel down to Colorado. The Colorado Chiefs Association put on a roundtable discussion for chiefs from surrounding states. I'll echo both sides on the science that's been put in place on the marijuana. To me is scary, and the lack of it's there at this point as we're establishing limits. The 5 nanogram thing I hear come up again and again nationally as you look at other states that are legalizing marijuana, legalizing edibles, and they've set the 5 nanogram driving limit because that's what Colorado did. As we sat around the table with people both from the marijuana industry and the Chiefs Association, we found that the magic number of 5 nanogram was a negotiation between the state and the retailers. There's not science in there determining that's the legal limit. Retailers said 10, states said 1, 5 met in the middle, and that was the agreement. So now as other states adopt that, there's still no science saying that that should be where the limit is. Same thing on the dosage units. What's an acceptable dosage unit for the use of marijuana? What's a user quantity to be taken in? The legislator that spoke to us said the freight train that got ahead of them was the lack of regulation on what could be in it, how much could be in it, and how the servings would be marked. They require that marijuana-infused product be marked, but the package is marked. So when you take the Skittles out of the bag, when you take the gummy bears out of the bag, there's no way of knowing whether or not it's THC infused. So their number one caution was that should you go down this road, make sure that it's all-inclusive. Because once that freight train starts on a multi-million-dollar enterprise, it's really hard to make that change once it's going. Scribbling notes in the back so I didn't repeat. I guess that was the primary things I wanted to get in. They already touched on the THC oils and the potency of that. They tested a plant while we were down there at 36% THC. The control mechanisms just aren't there yet. We're very fortunate to have Colorado as a petri dish to look at and see what's worked and what hasn't worked. So I would encourage before anything happens, we take a look at some science and give some time for that to evolve before we move anywhere.
Questions for the chief? Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Bennett Sondino. I represent Wyoming NORML here today. And I just had a couple things to say. The handouts that we have provided the actual data from the NHTSA report, which is the Highway Traffic Safety Report on drugs and alcohol. So you've got a copy of that. There's an article which essentially does a fairly decent job of tearing apart the HIDTA because it's such poor science. If I had handed it in at any point during my education, if I hadn't been failed, it would have been because they handed it back and had me redo it. They transpose numbers, they misrepresent the data, and even the translation from percentage to decimal place is lost on them. I mean, the article in Forbes that we included does a fairly good job of describing it, but they reference a 25 times increase in vehicular accidents based on cannabinoids in the system. But what they actually found was 1.25 from a baseline of 1. So it was actually a 25% increase, not 25 times. And that was how they represented the data. Now, I mean, it goes on and on. I can give you more examples, but it's unnecessary because the Forbes article that you've been provided will do a decent job of explaining some of the things that are wrong with the HIDTA report. The other one is an actual peer-reviewed research report from the Journal of Adolescent Health, and that report showed that adolescent use actually decreases with the ratification of medical marijuana laws in the states. So you can take a look at an actual peer-reviewed journal article about decreases in teen use with medical marijuana states. You can take a look at the actual data from the Highway Transportation, and you can read conscientious objectors' problems with the HIDTA. And I just wanted to explain that to you so you knew what you were reading. And thank you for accepting the information.
Mitch, did you get his name?
Could you spell it for us real quick?
Bennett, B-E-N-N-E-T-T. Sondeno, S-O-N-D-E-N-O.
Thank you.
Question for Mr. Sondino. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Public comment. Any other public comment on this? All right, let's move to Bill. We have controlled substances. Mitch, would you walk us through this?
Mr. Chairman, yes. So in the bill here, I'll provide a little bit of history before we get going. In our April meeting, the committee requested that LSO and the Attorney General's office, including DCI, work together to come up with proposed language for the prosecution of edible removals in Wyoming. In going through that process, and as we heard testimony at our August meeting, there's basically two routes that were kind of considered: doing a concentration route and doing an aggregate weight route. Well, as DCI testified, there's not a certified lab in the nation that could go the concentration route right now, which kind of left us with the aggregate weight route that you see in front of you today. Then turning to the bill, on page 3, you'll see the additional language, or you'll see the language provided in there, and this is being amended in 1031 CI, which is the misdemeanor controlled substance possession statute. Spells out the weights and what substances as far as misdemeanor offenses. There's other parts in the statute that aren't included in here, which basically state that if it's an above the weights and forms here, it turns into a felony. And so, in looking at page 3, we have a new subparagraph G and H. Subparagraph G is the language that was worked on with the Attorney General's office and DCI. Essentially just tries to spell out edibles and drinkables in any of its variety of forms, containing either marijuana or, I'm going to do the abbreviation THC, no more than 3 ounces. And the 3 ounces was essentially our guess of what should be in there. There wasn't any indication. We looked at a few other states. Texas has a 3 ounce. Our plant form is set at 3 ounce. That was put in there. Committee discussed that pretty in detail at the last meeting. Subparagraph H in there, lines 14 through 16 on page 3, was a suggestion made by the Prosecutors Association that there was a hole in the statute, that if it didn't fall within any of the forms listed, that it could potentially not be prosecutable. And so that was his suggested language that be included in here as well, and we included that. Again, the weight was kind of based upon looking at what our other statutes kind of have in there, and a guess, essentially, of what that might be, and that's kind of where the bill is at, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. Questions of LSO? Yes, Representative Dawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I mean, under the status quo right now, the weight that you're mentioning includes whatever cutting agents or other substances in there. So you're saying a 3.1 ounce brand is potentially a felony under this provision?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pelkey, you are correct that in statute currently those carrier agents, cutting agents are included in the aggregate weight, and so if it is a 3.1 ounce brownie based upon the 3 ounces specified in statute, yes.
And under this bill? Under this bill, it would still be a felony?
Under this bill?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
3.1 ounces would be a felony.
Okay. Other questions of LSO at the moment?
Mr. Chairman, you mentioned that Texas had this law in place down there. Was there any other states that had edible law that had the 3 ounces, or was Texas the only one?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Penal, Texas does not have this law. What we did in looking at other states is where's the weight being set at? And Texas was like Wyoming, 3 ounces. I believe I testified at the last meeting in looking at what other states are. The misdemeanor charges essentially run from a couple ounces to a pound. and it's kind of their policy decision on where to draw that line. As far as addressing edibles and doing my research, it's been difficult. Wyoming's in the same position as a lot of the other states surrounding Colorado. There's articles in regarding Nebraska about their legislature trying to address this issue. And really, as I testified at our last meeting, we're kind of on the frontier of it and how to address the prosecution of edibles.
Judge Fenn. Now leaning forward, we're excited to have you here. Come up and want to join us at the table?
Well, I will comment just briefly. I think the judiciary is certainly supportive of some legislation to help define this, because this has been a developing problem, and you've heard testimony from other judges in the past. Whether it's 3 ounces or 10 ounces, that's a policy decision to be made by you folks. The science is kind of behind the product at this point in time. As I understand it, it's difficult to have a chocolate bar infused with this oil or marijuana substance. The science isn't there to really say how much marijuana component there is. And that's been somewhat of a problem, particularly in the southern part of the state in the last couple of years. Judges don't really know how to handle that. One interpretation is that it's like a cutting agent and it falls within the NORML statute, but that, I don't know if that's really fair or right. We don't have any decisions from the Wyoming Supreme Court. So I think the judiciary and district court judges are just looking for some policy guidance from the legislature, certainly supportive of something to define this better. But the big decision as to how much is really kind of, the struggle is there's really not, as I understand it, a lot of science to parse out percentages and how much is in a brownie or a chocolate bar or edible. So I think the only way you can really do it is if it tests positive and it's a chocolate bar of a certain size, and it arguably fits in a felony category if that's your policy decision. I don't think the judiciary has a position that it should be 3 ounces and by golly you're a terrible drug dealer and you should face a felony, but we really do look for some guidance as to help us define that. I don't know if that answers, I guess that's my response. And if any specific questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Senator Von Flager.
Judge Finn, have you had a case in front of you just on edibles, and if so, how did you handle it? What were they charged?
I have not. I've had some edibles, but I've also had about a bale of marijuana in the back of the pickup too. So it was really a non-issue. Where anecdotally, Judge Couch, or now Justice Couch, he's seen more of it in the southern state than I think about anybody. And he's seen it in juvenile court. He has had that. He's raised these. I think he's appeared before you in the past about some of these issues. I think he's probably had the most experience. It seems to be, consistent with coming from Colorado into the southern part of the state. I've had it in a case or two that I've been involved in, but it really wasn't an issue because there was a felony amount of actual plant marijuana involved, and the edibles were kind of a side issue. So I've not had to deal with it directly.
Other questions of the judge? Yes, Representative Croker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Am I correct in assuming that the basic difference in law, I know it's based on weight, but the idea behind it and the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony is essentially it's a misdemeanor if it's more intended for individual use, and it's a felony if it gets to the point where it could be, distributed, sold, that kind of thing. Is that kind of the rationale behind it?
It's a little more specific than that. I mean, it's based on a certain amount, and it varies between the types of drugs. But so it's weight, and if it fits a certain weight, then it's a felony. If it's lower than that, it's a misdemeanor. And the cutting agent, and the classic could be cocaine. If it was pure cocaine and then it's been cut 3 or 4 times with some other powder, all that is included in that weight And so that's the way the law, as I understand it, has been and developed. And so that cutting agent is part of that weight. The interpretation, I think, that has gone on so far is a chocolate bar is part of that weight. It's part of the carrying agent, the cutting agent, if you will, recognizing that arguably that may not make sense, thus the need for some clarification and perhaps this new legislation. But purely by the volume or the weight, sort of is a line saying, yes, this is more than just personal consumption. This is kind of implicitly for distribution. There's other factors as well. I mean, a lot of paraphernalia is found, and scales and ways to split it up and things that are often found, at least in my experience in court. So there's other things that kind of suggest that. But I think the law is, and Mr. Crone's probably more attuned to it than I am. I see them as they get to me. It's really based on the weight of the product, including the cutting agent.
That's right.
Other question? Oh, Representative Ms. Halverson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So explain to me, if you can, why Justice Couts was unable to prosecute the edible case that came before him. If you say that in cocaine, the cutting agent is included in the weight, so why did Justice Couts draw the line at being able to prosecute an edible because it was cut with flour and sugar?
I wish I could tell you exactly, because it was kind of a very technical issue, and I don't know if he didn't or did prosecute. I remember him floating the idea around, but he was just concerned that is chocolate a cutting agent? Should it be included in the 3 ounce? I think it was that simple. I think there's more technical aspect to that, but my basic understanding, I think probably the one to convey to you is, it is chocolate and flour and sugar, a carrying agent that fits in this category, and there's really no way to test a percentage, and I think that's where he was really struggling. He had a, if I recall right, he had a kind of like a Hershey's bar that was labeled, some Hershey's High or something like that, and it even had on the label a percentage of the THC, but he still struggled with it because when the lab came and the challenge came from the defense, I think, says, prove, the state prove it. How much THC is in here? And how many ounces? And the technology, as I understood it, wasn't available for them to parse that out.
Attorney General's rep is...
Yeah, and it wasn't in plant form, for marijuana in particular. Yes.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, I think Judge Fenn has said most exactly, but part of the challenge that Judge Couts has had and some of the judges in the southeastern part of the state, it's not as much of a legal issue. There's also a proof issue. I mean, if it depends in part on the testimony by our analysts from the crime lab, who are often the folks there. If you get the Hershey's bar and you can talk about it. You can't say it's plant, powder, pill, but what the question is can you say that it is liquid form, because that was the ingredient that was included into this chocolate bar when it was made, and is it still in liquid form? And it's not been resolved by the Wyoming Supreme Court. So our office has not yet had to take a position on it. But we would be the ones handling the appeal to the Wyoming Supreme Court if there were a criminal issue where it came up. But if we were to make and succeed with the argument that it's liquid form and just a carrying agent, then the amount that would be necessary is 0.3 of a gram. So the amount is quite small, and so there is the potential, and I think this is one of the other things that the judges have struggled with is, first of all, let's move away from let's stay with the chocolate bar. It can be there's a sort of a double take moment when you announce that a chocolate bar is a liquid. But on the other hand, that is what's being used in these more sophisticated manufacturing processes. It's not a plant. There's not the way the marijuana brownies of old. You can find leaves and other material. You're looking at liquids that have been infused in a relatively sophisticated manufacturing process. So I tying it back, one of the challenges is just a lack of resolution so far. But I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that if there's one possibility, which is that it turns out that there's not a law at all banning these substances in Wyoming. The other possibility is that there is a law and it's harsher than I think anyone is suggesting in the context of this, which would be 0.3 of a gram of the chocolate bar, and you're now looking at a felony. So I mean that could be, that's not probably even one gummy bear. So you're looking at portions of a gummy bear. So I just want to make the committee aware, in some ways, an answer on an amount, which I think, as Judge Perry mentioned in August, is a quintessentially legislative decision. And there's no magical number here that we can say to you, I can prove with a peer review study that this is enough and this is not enough. But rather it's the kind of judgment that we as a society entrust to our legislature to make those kinds of determinations for our government. So, but that's the challenge we've had. I don't, it's possible that we could prevail, that the state could advance and prevail on an argument that the chocolate bar is liquid form THC. But I think this bill would obviate the need for us to deal with that on that level as well. So.
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At one of our previous meetings, we heard that there was a lab in Pennsylvania that was working on a way to measure the THC in an edible. Do you have any idea of the progress?
I don't have any information on developments. It is hard. The manufacturing process is becoming more regularized, but it's not regulated the way some of our larger American corporations manufacture. Heinz 57 ketchup. They work very hard to make sure it's always the same, and every bottle of Heinz 57 ketchup tastes like every other bottle. That's not. We're not at that level of sophistication, I don't think, in the marijuana industry, and I think it would be difficult, given some of the overlays from the federal government's restrictions. I mean, marijuana is still illegal under federal law. Making some of the transitions into a sophisticated organization pretty challenging because of the regulatory risks at that level.
Any questions, Mr. Marathon? Thank you. Thank you. Let's open this up for public comment. Please.
Oh, no problem. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the association, there is no bill for legalization of THC or marijuana before you, therefore the association has no position. However, if there was, I can't imagine we would be supporting it. And that's based certainly on the types of cases that we see routinely in our day-to-day operations as prosecutors. But we sit here today and we have a problem. And that problem is marijuana, specifically listed in statute, Schedule 1, is unlawful. THC, active ingredient, component in marijuana, also illegal, specifically mentioned in the law. A few courts around the state have been mentioned, have been struggling with these edibles. Wasn't a problem until Colorado legalized. And the issue really is, and I might make this simpler, where do the edibles fit? How does a prosecutor charge edibles as a violation to get you into the weight categories? And currently in Wyoming law, for a controlled substance in plant form, no more than 3 ounces is a misdemeanor. In liquid form, no more than 0.3 of a gram is a misdemeanor. Powder or crystalline form, no more than 3 grams. Pill or capsule form, no more than 3 grams. And cocaine-based crack cocaine, not more than 0.5 of a gram. So that's what Wyoming does. So when a prosecutor and a law enforcement officer is sitting there looking at a gummy bear on the table, what is it? Is it plant? Doesn't appear to be. Is it liquid? Doesn't appear to be. Powder or crystalline? Doesn't appear to be. Pill or capsule? No. And it's not crack-based. So therefore, how do you charge it? You have to charge it under one of those 3. And I think that's where the judges are struggling. Certainly in the recent decision out of Laramie County, Judge Sharp, the individual had 1.9 pounds of edible marijuana, candies, cookies, bread, and chocolate bars. That case was ultimately dismissed. It was charged as felony amount in plant form. I would probably tend to agree it's not in plant form when you're looking at cookies. Probably the correct decision. Has it been an issue up here in Park County? No, we haven't seen edibles to my knowledge. We're about as far removed from Colorado as you can get in the state of Wyoming, and in my opinion, that's good when it comes to this. And I think that's why the southern part of the state is seeing these issues being close to Colorado. But it is a problem, and we need to address it. My personal opinion is it goes into the substance's liquid form, solidifies, and if there was a way to do it, heat it up or whatever, you could get it back to liquid form and measure it. But we're not there yet, and I don't think we want to put our labs through that, and if you could even do that, it would be cost prohibitive. We talked about the weights, the carrier elements. That issue really doesn't even, we don't really get to that stage of whether flour and weed is a cutting agent or a diluting agent, I don't believe, because we can't figure out how to charge it to begin with. But that has been the law for some time. There's really been no great changes in the law that I read you. It's just currently what we're dealing with. So in the current bill, Mr. Chairman, excuse my mess here. The prosecutors really don't take a position on what you're doing with the weights. However, I would note from the previous testimony that an ounce can give you on the minimum size 347 individual edibles. So you could get over 1,000 edibles for 1 ounce of marijuana. So just under 3 ounces you could get, 347 edibles for an ounce. So you could get just over 1,000 edibles and still be a misdemeanor. If you factor in and try to give it the equivalent to what we currently have in plant form. What is the right number in edible form? I don't know. I assume the decision is going to be if we go with the 3 ounces or a likewise weight, that it will spread fairly fast. If you're bringing edibles back into Wyoming, make sure they're the lightest ones you can buy. Probably the little gummy bears instead of big fat brownies or cookies. If we're going to go on weight alone. It is correct, it's so cost prohibitive and to determine concentrations in a particular product right now. I don't think it's the fact that there's no machine out there that can do it, it's the fact that our crime lab doesn't have one, and to do that in every single case would be both time and cost prohibitive. In the current proposal, Mr. Chairman, page 3, line 10, the only issue that we have is the word drinks. And why that is confusing, and I certainly understand there's drinks being sold in Colorado that have liquid THC in them or the THC oil. The problem is that seems to conflict a little bit with our current statute talking about liquid form. People, and certainly in the law enforcement community, the Highway Patrol can certainly testify to this. How often we see it in Wyoming, I don't know, but it's certainly a transportation technique, concealment device for individuals to liquefy cocaine, methamphetamine, and I assume transport THC oils and things like that in fuel tanks, batteries, any types of way they can conceal that. So technically, you could have I guess up to 3 ounces of liquid form. Right now, that would be a felony at 0.3 of a gram is a felony level amount. And we're talking methamphetamine in a syringe, cocaine in a syringe, in liquid form, 0.3 of a gram. Is that going to cause confusion if somebody has a vial there and they'll say, that's my drink? Do we have to sit in there and argue, well, was he going to drink it or was he going to shoot it up? It causes some confusion. We see that as a potential problem. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, prosecutors are in support of the current draft with the exception of how we tackle the drink issue. We need something to address it because right now THC, marijuana are illegal in the state of Wyoming, and edibles containing THC need to be prosecuted.
Questions? Yes, Representative.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Squirt, do you think that 3 ounces is the right number? And the reason I ask that, I just Googled what a 3-ounce cookie looks like, and come to find out that I see these cookies in the aisle all the time. 3 ounces is not that large. And sometimes I wonder if the cookie, for instance, that this individual from Powell ingested, it looks like they were trying to distill something. I wonder if they were trying to meet a certain limit. I don't know the thought behind all that. They're trying to pack as much THC into that cookie as possible. And do you think that, in your opinion, that 3 ounces is the right number for us?
Mr. Chairman, I'm probably right there with Judge Fenn. It's a policy decision on the weights. We need something, certainly, maybe we start with the 3 ounces, and then if we're figuring out, and again, this is a developing field, maybe we have to backtrack that and knock that number down. I did the same thing last night. I looked at a little pack of donuts of my child, and there was 6 little chocolate donuts in there, and I looked at what it weighed, and it's 3.3 ounces, so those little donut packs. So I was trying to figure out what's cookies, brownies, what do these things weigh? Because you don't usually think about it, you just eat it. So, at the end of the day, again, we're happy with that with the exception of the drink issue and how we deal with the drink, I don't know, because it's so close to our liquid category already. And there's a Wyoming Supreme Court case 1997 that I got the good fortune to argue that it was liquid methamphetamine contained in a bong, and the argument was, the lab needs to separate the water from the methamphetamine, and the Supreme Court said we're not going down that road, which is getting back to testing concentration. So he was convicted felony level amount of methamphetamine, and that's consistent with our statute. So,
Other questions, Mr. Skoric? Thank you, sir.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Public comment. Come on up.
I just have one comment.
You need to come up, and if you do, you need to in, and just for the record.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Carrie Satterwhite. When you're talking about edibles, I want you to keep in mind also that it's not just cookies or drinks, although I do get the whole problem with the edibles. You're talking about the agents that they're, like the cookie that comes with it. With CBD oils, they do have, even though it's a very small amount, have some form of THC in them. So when you're talking 3 ounces of CBD oil, that potentially could fall under this edibles rule.
I think we dealt with CBD oil last session. Yeah. Already. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Public comment. In the back row, the silent types. Second to the back row. We'll just keep calling our way up. I see everybody looking back there. This would be your opportunity if you want to share anything or going forward. Yes, sir.
My name is Perry Jones. I'm with the Highway Patrol. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the committee today, Mr. Chairman. Without weighing in on the social ramifications of the tough decision you have to make, I just wanted to emphasize again that our agency is deeply concerned and committed to highway safety, and we know as a statewide law enforcement agency that 40 to 45% of our fatal crashes involve impairment of some degree, whether alcohol or drugs, and 90% of our non-seat belted fatalities involve impairment. And so, as an agency, the direction to our troopers is to aggressively enforce impaired driving statutes. And your difficult decision is to come up with a tool that allows our troopers to do that and know when an edible is something that somebody needs to be charged with. And so, we're in support of giving clarity and direction to our troopers and the deputies and police officers around the state, so that they know what the right thing to do is when that opportunity is presented to them. So,
questions of the major? Yes, Representative Escobar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question would be is how long have we actually been testing fatal victims of car crashes for cannabinoids?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I don't know that I have an answer for that, and I guess my answer would be typically we would test for that when there is some other indication in a fatal crash, if there's some indication that something besides alcohol is involved in that, then we may or may not request an actual blood test. So, not in every case is a blood test done to test for THC in the blood. If there's some contraband in the car or some reason to believe that it's not alcohol involved, but it might be a drug involved, then we may ask for a drug test. So that's about as much of a non-answer as I can give you. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I guess the root of the question really is trying to get to where, when we get data that's saying these fatal crashes now are showing there's a 25% increase in cannabinoids in the systems of those victims, then I'm trying to figure out where the baseline for that data is coming from.
Sure. Sure. And Mr. Chairman, it could be that in Colorado where that study was done, they have a policy or regulation or statute that requires a blood test in every fatal crash. That may be the answer. I don't know. That's not the case in Wyoming.
Thank you, Major Jones. That'll be it. Appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Mr. Odekoven, you were there when we went from flintlock to smoke black powder and wheel guns. Do you remember when they started pulling blood samples involved and all that?
Mr. Chairman, I do not. I'm with you. I remember when we did, but I do not have a clear answer for you. I can certainly check on that.
It's been 20 years or more.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Public comment. Anybody else from the public like to speak up on this matter before we bring it back to the committee? Okay, public comments closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? Got a motion on the bill? Second. And a second. Discussion on the bill.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Kinski.
I support the bill. I do want to circle back around to this question of testing for the level of THC concentration. I'm disturbed by the fact that, based on what we've heard here in the last time, you can have something that looks like a misdemeanor. It's less than 3 ounces, and it can contain enough THC to drop an elephant. And we've heard last time that there was no lab that could do it, then we heard that the equipment was expensive, now we heard there's no certified lab. I've just been doing some web surfing. There are labs, there are methodologies for testing the level of THC. The question of certified labs looks like it's being resolved very, very quickly because there's been a lot of activity to come up with a standardized system of testing and certification of labs, just like anything that takes place in a crime lab or a medical laboratory. So I don't want us to walk away thinking, well, it's pointless to talk about the concentration of THC. By the time we convene the budget, there may be a dozen certified labs who can assess the volume, the level, or the concentration of THC. What I'm reading here does confirm what Chief Eckert said that he was told in Colorado, which is, things got ahead of them there because they did not regulate what, how much, how to identify. It says here in Colorado, they said no more than 100 somethings in an edible, but they never said what the concentration was per volume of edibles. So the point of it is, I'd really like to see us come back again to revisit the question of felony versus misdemeanor on the basis of the THC concentration, and principally because of the fact that a single cookie can contain as much as a truckload of dope, and it doesn't seem right to charge that as a misdemeanor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Take an amendment.
Mr. Chairman?
We're ready for an amendment over on this side, I believe. Hold on a second here.
I had an amendment also.
Senator Von Flagrant first.
Okay, page 3, line 11. Strike the end of the sentence that says no more than 3 ounces on line 12. So no more than 3 ounces, strike that.
Okay, that's your motion, is just to strike, last of line 11 and line 12.
Yes.
And then put a period in there.
Yes.
Okay, is there a second? What was the second? Representative Escobar, second. Okay? All right, discussion on the amendment.
So, if I can explain my reasoning here, is we have no way of telling how much THC is contained in any edible, but yet they're worried, and rightfully so, the judges are worried that there's really no law that allows them to prosecute at all. And until we have a good test or a way of testing the concentration, I don't think this body should be labeling how much. Leave it all as a misdemeanor until you decide that there is a test available, that we can afford the test, and then they can come back in and institute the 3 ounces or whatever they need to at that time.
Okay? Yes, Representative Fennell.
Mr. Chairman, my question would be, so if they were shipping a truckload of brownies up from Colorado to distribute to the college, and they intercept them, that's a misdemeanor?
Yes, sir.
It's
Yes, it is, because we have no way of telling if there's a half an ounce of marijuana in that whole truckload, or if there's an ounce bag in every brownie. You know, I mean, that's why I don't think we should be labeling it with the amount.
Questions on this one? Yes, Representative Pelkey.
Just wanted to point out to the representative that they'd still be caught for intent to distribute, which is a felony. So even under this provision, there would be an intent to distribute, and if there's an intent to distribute even a misdemeanor amount, that could be charged as a felony. So your hypothetical, even though you're trying to paint it as an extreme measure, it actually isn't as extreme as you.
That would be unless they declared it was for personal use.
And then we eventually have to regulate the size of the truck.
Representative Stroker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the idea behind my amendment was similar. I was just gonna raise the amount because I was concerned 3 ounces wasn't sufficient, but I guess I'm not understanding if this, I wanna confirm this does what we think it does. So can we get LSO's opinion? Would striking the no more than 3 ounces, would it make any amount of edibles a misdemeanor, or, because I don't see that necessarily.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Croker, if we go look at current statute right now, and some other, under 1031C, there's some other paragraphs that basically specify, I think C3 here, and has in its possession any other controlled substance classified in Schedules 1, 2, or 3 in an amount greater than those set forth in paragraph CI, where we're specifying where these amounts are, or the weights are contained, is guilty of a felony. So I would read that language as, yes, it would all, regardless of the weight, it would be a misdemeanor offense.
Okay, fantastic.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Bonnefield.
What we're doing is if there's a 3.1 ounce cookie or brownie, you're making a felon out of that person who may be the age of ripe old age of 18 years old, carrying the fact that they can't hunt, can't vote, whatever, no guns, because they had 3.1 ounces. And it may have been just simple, somebody passed the bag over it was detectable in some manner. Or it could be enough to not take out an elephant, as was used earlier. We don't know. We don't know what that concentration is. No way we can tell. And so I can't see turning a whole possible part of a generation into felons just because they had 3.1 ounces. That's why I think we need to get rid of the weight until we can identify it.
Other discussion on this amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I think we're sending the wrong signal to the youth if we're just saying, you know, we're gonna let you slide on this one. That's my opinion of it. I think that we need to have a quantity in there. Maybe we need to raise the amount, but I don't think we need to just zero it out. I think there has to be a quantity. So I'm gonna vote against the amendment.
Keeping in mind that between now and legislative session, there may be advances in technology, there may be some more research and conversation on. So it's pretty wide open. Any other questions on this before we vote on the amendment? It's proposed, and the amendment is just to strike the no more than 3 ounces, so any volume of baked candies, edibles, or other similar forms would be a misdemeanor. Right, way you got it there, Mitch?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Ayes up in the air. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Noes up in the air. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Other amendments? Representative Kroger.
I would move to change, on page 3, line 12, change ounces to pounds.
Second.
For the reason of how, you need to have something there, but, I mean, I'm looking at the picture from this brochure and there's drinks on here. I mean, this drink is a lot more than 3 ounces. I just hate to think that we're turning somebody into a felon because they brought one drink back in. Same logic as before, but this at least does put a limit on it.
Okay.
Second.
No, we already had a second. You can't second this one.
Why not?
Okay, we've got a second. Discussion on the motion. Up to 3 pounds.
Question?
Before we go to the question though, I just caution you to remember the testimony we had from the sergeant just up the road. And it's easy to talk about, we just don't know. We do know about a young man who was a student here in Wyoming who jumped out of the 4th-story building. And it wasn't 3 pounds. And so let's just be cautious and keep this in perspective when it's children and so forth. So that was my
Mr.
lecture.
Chair.
Don't mean to do that.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, second here. Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, it concerns me if we don't pass, the previous one or this one, that it's going to encourage the manufacturers in Colorado to stick as much as possible in 1 ounce. And I think the incident that you just referred to is even more likely with the higher concentrations in a smaller edible. That's what greatly concerns me. So I think the previous motion to really not care about how much they have, other than you can still determine that they were intent to distribute. I thought that was a good compromise until we can figure out a way to test this. So I'm going to support this amendment with a set of 3 pounds.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kinsler.
With respect to Representative Miller, your comment, I think the manufacturers in Colorado are already loading as much into those things as they can. I think we're already there.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman. I think that with the 3 ounces, I think that's going to send a signal that we don't want them to come in Wyoming. Obviously, they're going to still come here, but I think just leaving it as is, and then if we, as we move down towards the session, maybe technology is updated where we can find out, more information. Maybe they've got better ways to come up with the amount of THC in these edibles. So I would leave it the same as it is now, and obviously, as we go forward, hopefully there'll be some technology come available. But I think we're sending the wrong signal. And when you have 3 pounds, that's quite a bit of weight. And here again, like you mentioned, we know of a young gentleman that lost his life, and it was a whole lot less than 3 pounds.
Yes, Representative Grover.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would remind the committee, it's still illegal. It's still, an amount less than 3 pounds will still be punishable by a year in jail. So by no means are we saying it's okay. I just think we need to have a proportionality where you have somebody who does something that's legal in Colorado and forgets that he has, has one cookie or one brownie left in his car when he drives back. The difference between a felony and misdemeanor is huge, and I think that's worth considering.
Yes, Representative Winters.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. The idea that someone might have a 3-pound cookie in their car left over is boggling to me. I mean, a 3 pound cookies. Yes, it's quite a bit. Changing from 3 ounces to 3 pounds is a significantly radical shift. This right here is 16.9 ounces. I was just looking at that. You can, there are 16 ounces in 1 pound. To raise it to 1 pound, I mean, you're talking about 5 times more than what we were originally looking at. Now we're talking about multiplying that by 3. That is a radical shift. I mean, at first I was thinking, if we bumped it up from 3 ounces, that may make some sense, because a 3-ounce cookie you can buy almost anywhere, but a 3-pound cookie, I've never even seen that large of a loaf of bread that I want. And so I would be opposed to this, and maybe we could bring another motion that would have a little bit more balance.
Yes, Senator.
Addressing the 3-pound cookie, I'm sure they exist, but it's the accumulation of all that's in that box. You could have a box with all sorts of brownies and cookies in it, and it weighs over 3 pounds, would be a felony. Weighs under 3 pounds, you're misdemeanor. So it's not just a cookie or a brownie we're speaking of. We're speaking of the whole accumulation of the weight.
Any other discussion on the motion before we go to the vote?
Question.
Okay, all in favor of the, I'll just say the amendment. The 3-pounder. All in favor of the 3-pounder. Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Hands up for the ayes. Only one hand up there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the noes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative Kroger.
I'll make a new motion and change 3 ounces to 1 pound, just to see if that compromise serves it.
All right, the motion is to 1 pound. Do we have a second?
Question. Second.
Do we have a second? Yes. You're the first second. All right. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Ayes in the air.
What did this no? Huh, we're missing a guy here.
He left on his
It'll
own.
take a long time before we get to the nose. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
7's the majority.
Yes, the majority is.
Ayes
So that's
have
1
it.
pound.
The ayes have it. Okay, it's at 1 pound right now. What about the idea of removing the word drinks, as the prosecutor suggested, that he and his association were concerned with? Chairman Miller.
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna add one other word in this also. On page 3, line 8, actually 2 words. After 4, insert dilute food in front of preparations, just to make it clear that we're talking about marijuana food or cookies or whatever. And also, since the drinks is a concern, I guess we could strike drinks. Because that would be covered by food.
Or, say that again?
Okay, line 8, after the word for, insert dilute food.
So it's gonna read for dilute food preparations?
Correct. And then strike on line 10, drinks.
And strike drink. Okay, we've got a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There's a second, discussion on the motion. First, let me ask Mitch, how does that read, Mitch?
For dilute food preparations.
I'm not
I
sure.
don't know what the definition of dilute is, I'll have to look that up, but.
Not sure what we mean, I think I know what you mean, but I'm not sure what it says.
Mr. Chairman, to me, dilute means less than like the marijuana plant itself. If you have 3 ounces of marijuana plant and you have a 3-ounce dilute food preparation, the food preparation is going to be less marijuana. That's the intent anyway.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Von Flater.
I see that it's including but not limited to baked goods, candies, drinks, edibles, or any other similar form containing marijuana or THC. So I think the diluted food or dilute food or whatever that correct term is not needed. It's kind of redundant in that sentence is how I read that sentence. And then I would also mention, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
I would also mention on drinks, if you remove drinks and then somebody argues that it falls under liquid, which is 0.3 of a gram, any form, any bottle whatsoever would make you fall over a felon. You'd be a felon with a can of pop infused with THC of some sort. You'd instantly become a felon. So I'm really perplexed. I don't know what to do about the word drinks because it does sort of conflict. But I don't know, that's left up to the judges.
Well, I think the issue here is sophisticated transporters figured that out. They just pour everything into the drink. And then all of a sudden, you can move great volumes where if it was in an injectable form. Pour enough injectables into a 12-ounce drink and call it a drink. And I don't know what the answer is, but maybe we can figure that out between now and then.
Mr. Stewart argued this in front of the Supreme Court, didn't he?
I think we're responding to the issue we raised on this. I'd like to see it removed. Okay, so we're still sitting on a motion of for dilute, or the added to dilute food. Any other discussion on that motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, see it here, Brian. Hold on, there was a vigorous aye.
You want to show that?
No. Yes, Representative Winters.
Mr. Chair, then I would go ahead on line 10 on page 3, strike the word drinks.
Got a motion? We have a second.
Second.
Got a motion and a second.
Question.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kinski.
Just tell me where we are. On line 3, all we're doing is striking the word drinks?
On line 10.
Line 10.
It's the term drinks.
I thought we just disposed of that when there was only a single aye vote.
No, that was a combined, that was a much larger, more comprehensive motion.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
That sounded good.
Okay, got a motion second. Any more discussion? And just, I'll throw something in. Recognizing what our county attorney Lee shared with us about those challenges, this is probably, whether this motion goes up or down, this bill goes forward, we need to figure out the right answer so that we don't create problems or create loopholes. So, all right, all in favor of removing the word drinks, say aye.
Aye.
Noes?
No.
Noes. Okay, that one failed. All right, any other Any other motion amendments? Okay, Mitch, the bill as presented has been changed how, since we've covered a lot of different amendments? I think it's just the one, isn't it? What's that, 1 pound?
Mr. Chairman, line 12, 3 ounces has been struck, 1 pound has been inserted.
Okay. All right, discussion on the bill, any further discussion? Oh, excuse me, everywhere. Yes, Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to vote no on this bill. We were told in testimony in Gillette that anything we do will be arbitrary. I don't think it's the legislature's job to be arbitrary for the purpose of making prosecutions easier. The proper role of government is to protect our citizens from arbitrary, I hate to use the word police powers, but arbitrary laws. And I would call, we even have in our Constitution, Article 1, Section 7, which prohibits, well, it says no absolute or arbitrary power. And I would urge my fellow committee members to keep in mind our higher obligation to our residents and to our Constitution. And that's all I have to say about that. I would urge a no vote.
Representative Escobar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was gonna say this yesterday, and I'm glad the Director of Corrections is still here, because we look in the mirror and we see the problem with prison overcrowding. During my time on appropriations, I did a research paper on the number of felonies that the legislature had created over the past 20 years. And I've even sponsored some of that legislation myself. But if we keep going down this road, then we'll have to build that other bridge. And through this legislation, that's not a good policy decision by the policymakers at this table. I too will be voting no.
I just remind us of a couple of things. Yesterday, when we were talking about our Department of Corrections, the 3 prongs they focused on, the first one was public safety. And again, today we heard Sheriff Johnson talk about public safety. And while the term and the use of arbitrary was used, I think it was used in the form of the amount, not about the law itself. And their gap that was identified by the judges. And you recall that very clear and desperate plea from the judges in Gillette when they looked at us and said, you have to do something. Arbitrary, up and down, we can always look at volumes, ways of testing, and so forth. We had a pretty clear message about a hole in the law. Our prosecutor today said marijuana is illegal. But here, in this particular form, it's not clear in the statute. It doesn't mean that that makes it legal. It's just a new way of being processed. Maybe this just means that they take all the goodies and put them in a blender with a lot of water and then weigh that or reconstitute it. I don't know. But I'd just be careful about this and keep in mind about the aspect of public safety. Last night I visited with a grandmother who talked about adopting their grandchild because of the effects of drug abuse on their daughter. So that's really where we're at, folks. Just ask you to kind of weigh all that in as you're making decisions. How about the roll call, Mitch?
Senator Esquivel is excused. Senator Hicks?
Aye.
Senator Kinski?
Aye.
Senator Von Plater?
No.
Representative Baker?
Aye.
Representative Esquivel?
No.
Representative Halverson?
No.
Representative Croker?
No.
Representative Cron.
Aye.
Representative Pelkey.
No.
Representative Pinal.
Aye.
Representative Winters. Aye. Co-Chairman Christensen.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the motion passed. Of the Senate, there was 3 in favor. Of the House, 6 were in favor.
I think that takes care.
Well, maybe I have the wrong one.
Fine.
It was 5 and 5, the motion failed.
5-4.
Oh, yeah, you're right, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4. Five, four.
To the members of the committee, well, first to the public, thank you for joining us and spending so much time in this interim. A number of you have traveled to all 3 of our meetings. We've seen a number of you on both 2 of our meetings. It makes a huge difference when the community comes forward to talk about the legislation that's being proposed. We certainly appreciate your efforts. We want to thank LSO for your great efforts. They're helping us out. To the committee, we'll be, Chairman Miller and I will be looking at the bills that have passed and figuring out the routes and which side they'll start, the House or the Senate. And we'll let you know that in the future. Thank you for your good work. Representative Miller.
Same comments, thank everyone for coming, thank the committee, and the good attendance of the committee. We've had pretty much everyone here, almost every committee, and staff's done an outstanding job, so thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming.